Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Secrets from the Saddle podcast. And of course, we always start with coaches' announcements. Now, the first thing I want to say is that our contest is still going on. We're still giving out prizes every Friday for reviews. Now, make sure you put your Instagram handle because I haven't been able to find the last couple people and thanking them for their reviews and to give them a prize, a giveaway. So that's the first thing. Don't forget to put out reviews and a rating and also share it with your fellow cyclists. I know that this episodes are going to touch hearts of everybody around the world, and it just goes to this one is the next one that's going to be so amazing. But before I get in there, I just have to share with you something that I am personally doing now. It's a 4-week cycling skills program, and what I love doing is I've been coaching online or coaching programs every winter for the last 16 years. And what I've done is I've taken the fundamental parts of the cycling skills program and I put them into different modules. So what does everybody want to learn? They want to learn how to become a more efficient cyclist, so in improving pedal stroke. They want to climb hills like a rock star, and they want to be able to have great strength, power, and speed. And plus, let's not forget, putting it all together with nutrition so you don't bonk on your ride. Now, wouldn't it be great to have all of that in a 4-week segment where you get to coach more one-on-one with me in my private Facebook group? So just go to the link in the description. Go to cycling. Well, here's the link: cyclingskillspro.com. cyclingskillspro.com or sylviedaou.ca. Either one will get you there. And we're starting July 8th. It's a private group, small. I'm only taking a certain amount of people because I really want to give a lot of value in this program, meaning we're going to have our weekly webinar where I'm going to teach you skills. I'm going to send you out with some homework, and then we're going to do Q&A. So you can come back and ask me all the questions that you have had while doing your rides, while doing your drills, and so that you can better understand how to become and implement all these skills. Isn't that amazing? So 4 weeks in July. Let's do it. Make sure you subscribe or check it out. So cyclingskillspro.com. All right. You ready?
Yes. Sounds good.
Okay. Welcome everyone to another amazing episode of Secrets from the Saddle, all things cycling with your host, Sylvie Daou, and this extraordinary lady from, I believe you're from Ottawa. Are you from Ottawa?
Kingston, Ontario. Close.
Kingston, close enough.
Yeah.
On the side of the river. Annie Foreman-Mackey, who is one of our amazing Canadian athletes who is currently training for Olympics. But before we bring her out, I'm going to give you a little bit of background around her, and we have a whole list of things that we are going to talk to her and she is super amazing. You're going to want to really settle in and listen to this one because I feel like she's going to lay some really good information on us, because not only is she training for the Olympics, everybody, but she's also a medical student presently. So she's doing both. And so I'm sure everybody's going to want to know, how does somebody do that? So before we bring Annie out, here's a little bit of background. She made the UCI World Championship debut in 2016 by winning bronze in a non-Olympic individual pursuit event. By the following year, she had become a key member of the team pursuit and contributed to the 4th place finish at Worlds in 2018 and 19 and 2020. You squeezed one in there before everything shut down.
Yeah, just awesome. Before.
Yeah, that's right. Annie has been competing at the UCI World Cup circuit since 15 and 16, so seasons. She's earned her first medal in January 2016 when she competed in the first 2 rounds of the team pursuit as a Canadian squad went to capture gold in Hong Kong. She's achieved a career highlight in December 2017. You remember all these, right, Annie? When she raced in the final as Canada won team pursuit gold. Yes, that one.
That one, yeah.
At the velodrome on home soil in Milton, which is always a fantastic thing. Here's a little bit more about her. She got into sport. She transitioned from cycling to cycling from competitive swimming. So we're going to hear about that. Which included 3 years of varsity team at McMaster. And like, as we know, she's a medical student at UBC, so she's balancing the two. She also loves discovering new music, playing her violin. Oh my God, that's good stress reliever right there. Teaching herself guitar, has been venturing into sourdough making. See, you never know what they write on these.
Yeah, I'm intrigued what's going to come next.
Yeah, that's right. You just don't have the knitting like the rest of
I certainly do not.
team members in training camps. So, oh my God, and she's an adventurer. So in the off season, she loves going off grid, backpacking and bike touring. So welcome, Annie. So happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited about getting into some details. So I always love asking the question, like, we know you went from swimming to cycling, but how did that happen?
Yeah.
Can you take us back to that?
Yeah, for sure. I think I had a few false starts in cycling, actually, and I'll take you back to pretty early on. So I come from a family who's not super into organized sports. So I'm definitely a little bit of an anomaly. And I guess I was first inspired when I was 9 years old, and I watched Simon Whitfield win the Olympic gold at in the triathlon. And Simon is from Kingston, my hometown, and I remember watching that and thinking, oh my goodness, like, this is someone who went to the high school that I'm probably going to go to, that I did end up going to. I'm from our hometown, and so at that point, I was like, I want to do triathlons. So I convinced my parents and dragged them out to the local Kids of Steel triathlons. Mm-hmm. There's one, the K-Town one, and then one in Loyalist, and there's a few of them. Mm-hmm. And so I would go out on my commuter kids bike, and I loved it. And I decided that I wanted to train for these. So my parents, not really knowing what to do with me in those situations, I would just ride my bike around the block. And then I would drop my bike with my mom on our front porch, and then I would run around the block. And I would pretend that I would be training for something big. So that's kind of where I started out. I kept doing that a little bit. And eventually I was given the feedback that to be a strong triathlete, I needed to improve sort of each of my sports. And so I needed to build some foundation swimming. So I, again, convinced my parents to sign me up for the local swim club, the Kingston Blue Marlins. And I started that, I believe, when I was in grade 8, somewhere around there. And pretty quickly took to the pool and dropped the other 2 sports. And
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And so I swam all the way through high school and my first 3 years of university. And so I'd say a lot of my sort of foundations in sport come from swimming, which is kind of neat. I do love to still open water swim when I can these days, but definitely transitioned a little bit later. So through university, I did a little bit of triathlons in the summer, kind of on the side. So I was still riding a little bit and had a bike, but not super serious. And it wasn't until my 3rd year university, when I'd had like a little bit of a rough year swimming. I was trying to figure out sort of what was next. Like I was losing a little bit of the love of competing in the pool, and my neighbor at the time actually convinced me to go out to the Good Friday road race in Hamilton, because I was at McMaster at the time. And I went out, and I remember, I think it was snowing and I was in like mountain bike shoes and didn't have shoe covers, so I just like put plastic bags around my feet and I did the Cat 3 race and I think I was second or something. And I was like, oh, like caught the bug.
Who's that?
Yes, it was definitely a bit of a hack job. And so that was kind of my first taste into road racing. And through the rest of that that year and the next, I dabbled a bit more in mountain biking. I had done a tiny bit of mountain biking in high school and had really loved it, and but hadn't really pursued it any further. So I kind of dabbled in road, mountain, definitely caught the cycling bug. And I guess it wasn't until 2013, I believe that's the year that I joined the cyclery. And that was, yeah,
like
so
just
that was
the well, how did you get in Ottawa to join
yeah.
the cyclery?
Yeah,
Okay, you
there's
got to
actually a funny
backtrack.
story about that. Yeah, so I guess at that, so around 20, yeah, I guess it would have been 2012. I convinced Lee Hobson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lee. She raced at the 2008 Olympics on the road, and she lives in Ontario. And I convinced her to coach me, first of all.
Okay.
And that was such like an incredible, she's fantastic. And such just like a strong, calm athlete influence. And for us, I was kind of one of the first people that she'd ever coached. And so we did it very collaboratively. We learned along the way, we would read the same books. And I think that was really important, especially early on in my career. And so I was doing some of the O-Cup races, and that's actually where I met Carrie Cartmill, who raced on the cyclery with me for many years. And so she was living in Hamilton, or in Toronto, Hamilton area, and racing for the cyclery. And she was like, "Oh, and you need to talk to Jenny." And so she was the one who put me in touch. And that's kind of how I made the transition to the cyclery. So for the first while, I was based in Hamilton, racing with the cyclery. I spent a summer or two living in Ottawa.
Okay.
Further on, and so yeah.
So after your first experience, you just continued on dominating on the race courses? Is that kind of what I'm thinking?
Dominating. I worked my way up.
Gear.
Upgraded the gear. Yeah, worked my way up kind of through the ranks. And the cycler was such an important role in my development. And I think that team has been such like a launching point for so many athletes. And for me, that was huge. And that was the support of Jenny True and Chris Reed and Vince, who runs the cyclery. Yeah. And there was just like a really like committed group of leaders and an incredible group of women on that team. We had some really, really special years, many of whom are still some of my best friends. So I think for me, that was like a really important part of sort of building those early years in my career and continuing to this day.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just amazing how many girls I've chatted with that have gone through the cyclery, because like being in Ottawa, I'd see all of them, like from, I don't know, from the local races all the way up to, the women's UCI Gatineau race, and they're racing in there. You're just like, oh my gosh, wow, what amazing, not mentors, but I just like,
mentors, and also I think building off of each other, and I think there's a really strong culture in that team of learning from each other and building each other up. And I think that sort of pushes everyone further in their career and development when everyone's invested in each other's growth. So I think that's definitely the culture played an important role in building.
Yeah, for sure, because it's just amazing looking at all the ladies just advance over the years, and and see where they're all at now and see where
Mhm.
Jenny is. But so after that, you're on the cyclery. Now, of course, you've gone to the UCI races and you've had some, podium finishes, but how did you find yourself on the track? Because there's a mixture, like half a year on the track and half a year still racing, like over in
Mhm.
Europe or down the States or
Yeah, so I raced Canada Games in 2013, and that was at the time that was one of the biggest races I'd ever done. I
uh-huh.
kind of just squeezed in. I was 22, so I was the oldest that you could be, and I ended up doing pretty well there. I won 2 gold medals, and that got my name a little bit sort of into the national team pool. And from
Ah,
there, I was invited to attend some track camps in LA. So at the time, the Milton velodrome wasn't
yeah,
built, it was sort of in
right.
the process. And so the national team was based in LA, and I was invited down to sort of a selection camp. They were trying to build the pool of athletes before Rio. So they invited
Oh,
some
okay.
road riders. And so I showed up on actually Jenny's old track bike, had really no idea what I was doing. We were thrown onto the track, and I think the only reason why I made it to the next round, because my technical skills were horrendous, the only reason I made it through was on the last day, everyone had to race an individual pursuit, and I had a time that was fast enough to get me to the next to get me an invite to the next camp. And so that was kind of my intro into the track. And there was sort of a sequence of camps that I was able to sort of learn some of the ropes for team pursuit and kind of progress my way on. I was part of the it wasn't really called Next Gen at the time, but it was sort of the development
Right.
group, which Ariane, for instance, was part of that as well, and Kinley,
Yeah.
and some of the people who, have continued on to the elite team.
Hmm.
So I kind of, progressed from there, and then was invited to be an alternate for the elite team. And so I attended a number of World Cups without racing. That's kind of a
Okay.
transition where you're training with the team and assisting in that process, but you're there in case there's an injury or something
Hmm.
happens. And I can tell you more about that in terms of I was the alternate for Rio, so that's an interesting role on the
Did you
team.
get to race?
I did not race in Rio, so
But you
I
got to go
was
there.
yeah, so I was the alternate. So I knew that there was an almost near zero chance that I would be racing
Hmm.
unless something catastrophic happened to the team, and that's something that you don't want for anyone.
Right.
So that was a really like a growing experience for me to be training for the biggest race of on in our season, knowing that I wasn't going to
In the
race the
world,
race
really,
in the
like in the
world.
world.
Yeah,
Come on, Annie. You're
yeah,
like, but I can't race.
yeah. So kind of worked my way up, and then post Rio was kind of when I transitioned into more of a starting lineup rider from there.
Oh, nice.
Hmm.
So how are those feelings about sitting, I hate to say it, but sitting on the sidelines, like kind of watching, I mean, yeah, watching your teammates when you're like, so was there 5 of you on the team? Or how many of you are on the team?
So there were 5 on the team, and I was the sort of the 6th rider. So in Rio, they
Oh,
actually rotated through 5 riders through the rounds. You're allowed to do that.
okay.
So that's why, as a 6th rider, there was minimal chance that I would
Right.
be racing. In terms of that experience, I'd say that I feel like I grew a lot as an athlete and a person
Mhm.
in that role, because I think to be a strong alternate, you have to learn to be selfless, and your sort of individual aspirations are secondary to those of the team. And to race
Yeah.
a strong team pursuit, the only way to do that is to ride selflessly and be committed to a team result. And so learning some of those skills, and also really understanding that there's so many people involved in a single performance, and as an alternate, you play a piece of the puzzle, and it was like shifting that mentality to, I'm here to do everything I possibly can so that my teammates can show up on the line on the day in the best place possible. And so that what that means is, in training, I did a lot of the lead-ins. So something on the track, you bring this team up to speed before flying efforts. So I would do that. When people were injured or tired, then I would be put in the line and sort of be a little bit of a placeholder. But for me, like, I was still newish to Team Pursuit. I had a lot to learn. And so sort of shifting that that perspective as like seeing as a learning opportunity, and also recognizing the role that you can play off the bike as well, both on and off the bike. I mean, obviously a really challenging experience. Even in Rio, like, I had to fly back to, I was living in the US at the time. I had to fly back to the US as the team was racing qualifications. So Emily Wood, who's one of the sports scientists, she actually just taped her phone to her camera because she was doing the video recording for the race. And so I was sitting on the bus, like, watching my teammates race, because they could only change, they could change the lineup up until the night before racing. So kind of my role was done at that point. So yeah, comes with its challenges, but I'd say that it's really an advantage to have gone through an Olympic preparation without the pressure of competing. I think definitely puts me in a better place this year, having gone through that experience.
Yeah, I can see how that would be beneficial now, like knowing what you know, because it's not new. But I would have thought that since you were there supporting the team, that did you leave because you had to leave, or did you leave?
Yeah, I had to leave there. It's all tricky,
I'm like,
because
why wouldn't you stay to the end? Did they send you home or what?
No, I had to leave. It's tricky with the village of having enough accreditation to be staying in the village. So there needed to be some switching of people. So yeah, not ideal, but you know.
Well, these things that we just don't know, I guess, as if you're like non-athlete, or how it works at the Olympics. Like you said, that there's only so many people can be in the Olympic village, then all right, well, that makes sense. So now moving forward, we've got like 4-5 years since then. What you've been up to, and what made you decide to go back to school? Or were you already kind of so you did a degree. You were working on your degree when you got into cycling. What degree? And so how does the schooling work in there?
So I kind of got into cycling near the end of my undergrad, so when I was still in McMaster. So my early years in cycling, I was finishing off that, and I was living in Hamilton. And then I actually did a master's of public health as I was racing. So I did it very part-time at the Dalalana School of Public Health at U of T, so in Toronto. And that was, a bit of a tricky balancing act. I never actually lived in Toronto. I was able to arrange a lot of my practicums. I did one in California. I did one remotely. I would commute in from Milton to classes in Toronto when I was in training camps. It was a bit of an undertaking, but for me, I really like having a bit of balance. I put balance in quotation marks because it may not be a balance of sorts. So I was sort of doing that.
I find that education's important if you're going to be into sport, because your sport at this level isn't always going to be there, forever. And it's better to be that balanced athlete where you do have something to fall back on, or you're trying to juggle the two, whether it takes you longer or not. But so you got your master's, and then you're like, I think I want to go to medical school.
So through my master's, Yeah, I had kind of been considering medical school, and I wasn't sure at the end of my undergrad whether it was what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to build some of my work in public health, so I started with that degree, and it was kind of partway through my master's that I was like, oh yeah, no, I do want to go to medical school, but the application process is a really burdensome, long process. And I actually applied first in 2017, and I was accepted for 2018, and I ended up turning it down because I decided at that point that I wanted to compete at the Tokyo Games. And so I was like, no, I'm gonna put that aside, and I'm gonna commit fully to these last 2 years leading into the games, knowing that then I would reapply in 2019 for a 2020 start. So as I was racing, I had to go back and do some prerequisite courses. I had to write the MCAT. The application process is long, so I did all of that again through 2019. I knew I really wanted to go to UBC, and there were some extra requirements I had to do for that. And so I was trying really hard to have everything in place for ending my career in Tokyo on a high note.
Last year,
and then start medical school in the fall. And so to do that, you have to apply in 2019. I actually was doing all of my interviews last March, so March 2020. I actually we were training in New Zealand. I flew to Vancouver for 48 hours to complete my interview in the middle of our Worlds prep, because I really, this was my top choice. I really wanted to make it happen, and my team was so incredible to support me in making sure that all happened. My teammates helped me prepare for what's called a multiple mini interview style interview. They ran stations for me. They made sure I was dressed in business casual clothes. They got me to the airport. It was a team effort to make this happen.
I guess. Did you even feel the time change at all?
I just drank a lot of coffee and somehow made it through, and I'm glad that they accepted me. And then after World Championships with COVID, I flew back from World Championships, and I had 3 more interviews in 10 days following. So I went to Queens, I went to Ottawa, and then I was flying to Calgary to have my final interview, and that's when everything shut down. So I landed in Calgary the day before my interview with an email saying that things had been canceled because of COVID. So that was kind of the start of everything unraveling.
You're like, what?
Yeah. And so in terms of my decision to start school, because that's a question that I've gotten a fair amount, because I had worked really hard to not have to do both at the same time, because I didn't really want to try to balance medical school and cycling or training for the Olympics. It wasn't really part of my plan. But as everything,
find anything that was any two things that were so high on the podium, the pendulum, right? Medical school and the Olympics. Put them all together.
A unique challenge. And for me, as I said, it wasn't really part of the plan, but as everything this past year, I think pretty much nothing has gone to the plan. And and I think the fact that I had really worked so hard to get into the school that I wanted to be at, things were so uncertain in the world. I decided to start school, and I started school not knowing if or when I would take a leave of absence, actually, because I was going to kind of see where things were at with the games. I would keep training, and at first I was thinking of taking leave of absence in January, but that ended up being really complicated with the school, because then I'd have to take a full year off. And anyways, I ended up doing both terms. And that, was an interesting balancing act. But it's hard when I have I feel like I have aspirations and like commitments to both sides of sort of my identity and what brings me joy. And so it was definitely a really challenging decision, but I don't regret it.
Wow, that's amazing. So what area of like medicine did you choose?
So I don't actually have to choose yet.
Oh,
Everyone
oh,
goes
you have, oh,
through pretty general, like the first 2 years, you're just thrown a huge amount of information about pretty much every aspect of medicine that they
okay.
possibly can. And then gradually by third year, fourth year, that's when I'll be starting to make decisions about
So
specialties.
that being said, you've been through 2 semesters.
Mhm.
Do you kind of have an idea? Like, is there kind of like one thing that is like totally intrigued you that you want to dive into? Or are you kind of like, not quite sure? I have a couple.
Yeah, this is generally everyone's question when you say that you're
Oh,
in medical
geez,
school.
it's not original? No, sad.
Yeah,
Sorry.
definitely still figuring that out.
Okay.
So my background, like through my public health degree and my outside interests, is I have a keen interest in harm reduction research and advocacy.
Okay.
So harm reduction is sort of building services and an approach to managing the experiences of people who use drugs. And so harm
Oh,
reduction
okay.
services are things like needle and syringe exchange programs, supervised consumption services,
Okay.
these type of approaches that are life-saving and incredibly important, especially right now in the midst of the worst
Yeah.
overdose crisis that we've ever experienced. And so most
Yeah.
of my work through my master's was actually looking at sort of the policy side of that, particularly supervised consumption services. And so coming in, I was like, oh, like maybe there might be a way that I would integrate that in and sort of bring the public health approach to my practice. So looking at things from the social determinants of health, sort of a holistic view of when you see a patient. So that's something that definitely I would like to integrate in. Right now, I kind of see myself in family medicine, but maybe like working in more of a community health center model. But then I'm also like, maybe emergency medicine is going to really pique my interest as an athlete, like working in high pressure situations.
That'll keep you excited like 20, like 12 hours on a shift.
Yeah, so definitely keeping things open. I feel like this year's been more of like ruling a few things out. But again, like going to medical school in the midst of a pandemic is also something that nobody really planned for. And
Right.
this year we did have limited opportunities to really be in clinic and working with patients. I got to be in some family practice clinics, but things were pretty restricted because we were doing a lot over Zoom. So I feel like there's so much more that I haven't explored yet. So I'm keeping my options open and open to, finding something that surprises me as well.
Right.
So to be
You're like,
determined.
I want to get in the hands-on stuff. No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, and as a first year medical student, like you have pretty minimal skills. I felt very privileged to help out with some of the COVID vaccination clinics. Before I got to Milton, I was working a few weeks of sort of 8 to 10 hour shifts there. And that was, really nice to be able to contribute to the efforts, and feel like everyone's so excited. It's funny because most people are not excited to get needles, but people coming into those clinics are like, yes, like this is my time, and like I get to get this shot. And so it's just like this moment of hope that as a vaccinator was like wonderful to get to share with. I mean, I was doing like 75 people a day. So it's pretty, it was pretty special.
Oh my God, that's super awesome. You got your first experience was there. It was like, yeah. And what better, bring in all the students. Come, we need help with our clinics.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's good.
So moving on, like, have you finished your semester? Because you said you had exams. So now you're out of school, like you're finished school, or I guess you're finished school until like the Olympics. So now you got the blinders on. You're
Yeah,
back at the
yes.
track the first time today, you said.
Yeah.
Legs are feeling a little like
A little heavy.
heavy.
Yeah, so we finished exams. I do have some work that I am doing through the summer. So we have some requirements for research. And then I kind of have 2 research projects on the go that I think will be a nice balance through the next few months. But definitely a relief to be finished with classes and to have survived a challenging 8 months, I guess. So yeah, definitely feel some relief, and I'm really excited to be back with the team. I was training a lot more sort of on my own in Vancouver through the winter, and that had its own challenges. Vancouver's lucky that I could ride outdoors for pretty much the whole winter.
Were you at Burnaby? Were you at that track?
Yeah, so I was training a little bit in Burnaby in the fall, and then through the winter, I did most of my training on the road and in the gym. Just the nature of, I was trying to build my like strength, endurance, and endurance, and so building those energy systems I could do off the track and balancing it with school sort of made a little bit more sense.
Right.
So definitely excited to be back on the track today with the team. I was a little bit nervous, but once we were riding in the line, I was like, okay, no, this is going to be okay.
Like, it's all good now. Let's just keep it going forward. Oh, that's so awesome. And yeah, you're right. It's good to have something to keep your mind on something else other than like, everything else moving forward. Well, I'm sure you must be excited that they're not canceling the Olympics, because that was the only option. I think they couldn't postpone it again. So your feelings are excitement. Sorry, I've got all these mosquitoes in my
house. Oh no.
Like I'm just like trying to avoid getting bitten again. But all right, so now I know you're finished school, but I'd love to know how you kind of balanced, like how many hours a week did you have school and how many hours did you have to train? And so how did you make that mesh together?
Good question. It really depended on the week, and I was definitely training fewer hours, but really sort of focused hours.
Yeah.
And sort of, for instance, through exams would be a little bit less, and particularly busy weeks at school. I did a lot of sort of periodizing the 2 of them together and trying to like shift that balance back and forth based on what was going on. And just tried to take advantage of the times that I did have a little bit of extra hours. So over Christmas, for instance, I tried to do a big block because I didn't travel anywhere. I stayed in Vancouver. Yeah. So yeah, really like piecing things together. In terms of training, I took a little bit of a different approach this past year. After everything shut down in March, I kind of talked with my coach, Matt, and I sort of took the reins and was training myself most of the time. Just because I needed to do something different to make it through all of the uncertainty and really sort of tap into what gets me excited to be on the bike. And I think that a lot of this year was in some ways like, not that I'd fallen out of love with cycling, but it's different when you're like so blinders on, like Olympics, and then all of a sudden like that shifts. And for me, there was also uncertainty about whether a games could happen next year. And there's just like, it's this like roller coaster of emotions. So for me, I was like, I need to enjoy this process, whatever the outcome is going to be. And so for me, that meant planning adventure rides. I did some big gravel rides. My teammate Kinley and I rode from Jasper to Banff through the summer when I was driving across the country. I did a bike packing trip across from across BC from Fernie to Hope with 3 of my friends. So things like this that like get me out on my bike, but in a way that's like a little bit less structured. I was doing some trail running. I cross country skied through the winter. These type of things for me really like grounded me, and I think in some ways like made it so that I was both building a strong base, but also keeping myself mentally fresh and excited, which I think is obviously a little bit of a risk. But when I started to, I don't know, I was able to build some really important pieces and hit power values that I'd never hit in my life. And so Matt was really trusting of me. Matt, my coach, was really trusting of me through this process and gave me a lot of freedom to guide that process. And I think that was really important to get myself to where I am right now. And obviously, now being back in the program, things are a bit more structured, but it's like, I feel ready for that in a way that probably, I don't know, 5 months ago, I wasn't ready to be in that environment again. So
I can see that. I mean, it's not like you're just starting. I mean, you've gone through Olympic prep. You've had 4 years in between. You're kind of like, and I like the fact that you were honest enough with yourself to say, you know, I know what I kind of need to do from a training standpoint. I'm going to switch it up, but I'm also not going to slack off. You know what I mean? Like make it all work. And that's pretty powerful. And like you said, now you're ready to, you know, school is done. You're back in Milton and you have like, what is it, 2 months now?
I think it was 77 days or
I was trying to think. I know
something.
last time I saw it was like 100 days. So I was like,
that's until the end of our racing.
Yeah, so 75 days. Let's say that. To race day. So it's like a little over, 2 months, and you're ready to put. Do you see that? See how big he is?
I do see the mosquito there.
I was like, so you're just ready to put in all that work and extra. Yeah. I'm proud of people who are, and I'm glad your coach was like okay with it, because sometimes they'd be like, yeah, no, I don't know.
No, and I think I'm really grateful for the trust that my coach, as well as my teammates as well, because like particularly 3 of my teammates were training together a lot through this past year, and I wasn't there to share in that process. And that's a lot of trust to ask your teammates to be like, okay, I'm in school, I'm like training late at night, like with a headlamp, or squeezing in rides and my lunch breaks between classes. And so that's also asking a lot of my teammates to trust that I'm going to show up strong and ready to contribute. And for that, I'm like particularly grateful. And I think that also gives like extra weight when, I don't know, on the hard days, it would be like, okay, like I have a responsibility to these girls who are like training their butts off every single day to show up in the best possible way, physically and mentally. And so that got me through a lot of the rainy winter rides in Vancouver.
So did you ever, Annie, did you ever feel inside like kind of like that gut tightening feeling that, because you were by yourself in Vancouver and not with the 3 girls? Because I know I would kind of feel just a little bit out of it, not out of it, but like not in the group, even though that's not a feeling that you really need to adopt. You know what I mean? It's a change up of a mindset, like you said, like understanding and trusting and everything. But did you ever feel that like feeling?
Yeah, definitely. And definitely feeling quite far away and a little bit out of the loop, and a little bit like you're falling behind. And so I tried to, like, I kept in touch with all of my teammates. We I got some wonderful like messages of support to getting me through as well. And what I was also pretty intentional, especially through the winter. I kind of got through the fall, and I did a fair amount of training on my own, and I realized, oh, like I need to build kind of a crew of people who are almost like honorary teammates to get like to make sure that I'm getting myself prepared, because I think you take it for granted having teammates around you all the time who are pushing you in training sessions. And we in the past we've spent so much time on the road together that I think it's easy to take that for granted. And it's not until I got a couple months in of like, oh, I'm training by myself, I haven't actually had someone really push me. So I was pretty lucky through the winter. I ended up connecting with a few people in particular who were just like ended up being such committed training partners through the winter. They would, my friend Nick, who's a former cross-country ski racer, he literally came out and did almost every track-specific interval session with me, squeezing it into lunch breaks. Sometimes we would like, I'd be like, okay, I have like an hour and a half, so I'm gonna put my helmet on like while I'm finishing my class, dip outside, and we'd be like, okay, we're not gonna make it in time, so we just like have to sprint home. But having like someone like that who is stronger than me, and so would push me, especially like on the 5th rep when I'm dying. So I feel so grateful for people like that, who were some stand-in training partners, that made sure that I was still getting that like motivation and excitement that comes from going out and suffering it as a collective as opposed to individually.
Yeah, I can see how that would be more motivating for sure, because there are probably times where you're like, oh, I could, like, but you have I know you have a strong reason why, obviously. It's not like me going out, I'm like, oh, well, I'll do 3 instead of 5. But, you know, be like, no, that adds up when you stop at that and, you know, reduce your training. But so awesome. All right. So now you're in Milton. You're like gearing up. All right. So we've gone through the daily routine. Now I know we're going towards Olympics. Now let's just think about after Olympics. I know that's in August. I'm sure you're ready to start school in September. But just, you want to talk a little bit about, like you said, that you're retiring, so you know that. So you have this big end goal, and then how are you going to transition yourself out? I mean, I'm sure like, okay, I'm just going to stop racing. Okay, I'm done. And now I'm going to focus 100% on school and get that done. But I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of a, I need to change over, you know, like you can't just drop all that cycling and move into, like, do you have kind of a plan?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And I think that it's something that everyone needs to be thinking about, and something that has definitely been on my mind. And I think this past year has been interesting because there have been times when it was like, it seemed like the games might be canceled again, and I would have to like work through in my head like, okay, if my retirement was tomorrow, what does that mean or look like, and how do I like get my head around that process? And so I feel like I've mentally gone through that process so many times over the past year.
So if the games would have been canceled, would that would have been it? Like, you're like, I'm not going to go through another round again. Like, that's it.
Yeah. And I felt pretty confident about that, and at peace with that. Obviously, I think it's going to be really, it's one thing to work through it in your head and another to actually live it. And so I think it will definitely be a tough transition in its own way. I wonder if having this year where it was like sort of this weird middle ground where I got started with school. So going back to classes is not going to be such a shock. Like, it was a bit of a shock to the system when I started this past year. So there's a little bit of familiarity there. And it's so busy once you're in classes that I think will take over in some way. And I think also mentally sort of having to go through the uncertainty of this year, in some ways has prepared me to look at this experience, like these next 75 days or so, with an extra sort of gratitude for even having the opportunity to go through these 75 days.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of this like last dance, and really diving into that and approaching it from that, like, this is a bonus in some ways. So for that, I think mentally I'm in a good place for that. I think the routine and like I think having this goal that you're working towards is something that I may have to find in other aspects of my life. I'll definitely be very active. I'm realizing how much I need physical activity and adventure to keep my sanity and keep me balanced. But it may be a little bit less on bikes. It might be more backpacking trips, maybe some trail running.
That's cool. Backpacking is awesome, especially for going back to Vancouver.
Totally, exactly. And so getting off the grid. So I think there's going to be no shortage of adventures coming up, but definitely will be a bit of a shift in terms of having that drive and this like clear goal that you're working towards, and also having a whole team around you who's supporting you in making those steps towards the goals. So I'm interested in how that's going to be, and I anticipate that it will be challenging in its own way, but I'm also excited for what comes next.
Oh my gosh, I'm super excited for you, because I love that. It's funny because sometimes I find a lot of people just have so much focus on the task at hand that they don't have anything else outside of that. And I love that, backcountry and camping, like, oh my gosh, there's so many adventurers out there. And like, you got the West Coast Trail, you've got, you got Banff, and
I've got a running list already.
Oh yeah, like seriously, go up to like Squamish and down to Canmore. But here I have a question. I've never asked anybody this. Do you do any meditation or journaling, like in the mornings?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I've gone through phases of meditation. So in the past, I've used Headspace.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like that app and the way that they approach it. I was using a lot of them for sleep. They have a whole sleep sort of, and yeah, all of these different meditations. And so I was using that as sort of wind downs before sleep. But journaling is actually something that in the past year and a half, I've been practicing a lot more. So actually back at the start of February, I reinstated my gratitude journaling, which I know sounds a little like hoity-toity.
No, don't, because I do
research backing it.
Yes, there is.
The impact on mental health. And
yes.
So I committed February 1st, and I was like, I'm going to be writing at least 3 things that I'm particularly grateful for each day. And I actually coordinated with a friend of mine, Elise, who's living in Victoria. She's a mountain biker and a good friend of mine. And we actually shared that entire month. We would text each other at the end of our day with the gratitude. And that was just, I think it takes about a month to really ingrain those habits in you. And it's also really nice to have the accountability of a friend and get to share in each other's successes and challenges. And so that I think was particularly important, getting through, I feel like February is like sometimes a little bit of a dark month. It's just like a little bit of a low point.
Not
So
sure
that
what you're
was,
going to get outside. You're like, is it
yeah.
nice? It's crap.
Yeah. And
Well,
so
at
that
least in
was,
Canada, Dory, at least down here, we know it's going to be cold and there's going to be
yeah.
snow. And that's it. You don't have to wonder, is it goes like Vancouver? I don't know if I could live in Vancouver.
I mean, February, it rains most days.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think I'd be like, no, I was gonna cry again. But
Yeah.
I'm excited that I'm glad I have a gratitude journal, and sometimes I write gratitudes, sometimes I write goals, sometimes I just write. And
Mhm.
and like you said, it takes a while to get used to. I get
Mhm.
up at like 5 a.m. and I sit and I do a little bit of reading, and then I do some journaling. And I find that not only is it quiet time, but it's time to kind of reflect. And
Mhm.
I enjoyed making that a routine.
Yeah.
During the
And
week. On the weekends, I catch up on my sleep.
yeah. So for me, I do it right before bed, actually. So it's
Ah,
part of my like book ending the day. And I think for me,
mhm.
I've struggled with sleep in the past. And so sort of it gets you in like a good headspace as well,
Yes.
um, before trying to fall asleep. And I
Hmm.
think for me, the biggest thing as well is going through that sort of the repetition of going through that process. I think for me also it has helped me make note of some of those moments as the day progresses. So even if I'm not
Right.
writing it down at that time, I'm like, oh, like yes, like I'm putting a pin in like this moment of the day,
Hmm.
which I think has really helped me maintain my mental health and sanity through the winter this year.
I think so. And also like moving forward, like
Sure.
as those thoughts start, whoa, getting crazy
Mhm.
leading up to, and
For
just
sure.
I don't know. I'm sure a lot of things are running through your head, and
Oh,
maybe it's good to put it on paper and get it out, right? But
definitely.
uh, that's cool. I'm gonna have to ask that to more of my interviewees,
Yeah, it's a good one.
because I also think that it's like if you're meditating or visualization, like I'm sure you probably getting into that as well, like
Mhm,
visualizing your race,
mhm,
visualizing the event, how
mhm,
it's going to play out, and all that, based on previous experience or
mhm,
new techniques, and how you girls are moving forward. That's probably, I imagine, a big part
mhm,
of a
definitely.
daily routine, like that bike ride to the velodrome.
Yeah, yeah,
or back, going back. Oh my God.
yeah.
That last interval.
Yeah, well, we're lucky at the
Well,
track. We get a lot of feedback. We get video to watch the
mm,
efforts. We get graphs that show you your pace, like every quarter lap. Like we get a lot of data and are able to evaluate that way. So we try to really nitpick at the track, and then when we leave the track, we wipe our hands of it and like try to create
oh,
some boundaries between it in some ways. So we try to hash everything out at the track and then be able to leave and think about other things as well.
yeah. So let me ask you a question. Do you find with all that data that it kind of gets overwhelming when you're just trying to perform? Like, it's just like, well, right here, your effort wasn't hard enough and you need to pick it up there. Not that it's not good feedback,
Mhm.
that you need to know that, maybe on the second lap, you dropped a little bit, so you need to sustain. But do you find that sometimes it just gets too much?
Definitely, yeah, and there definitely can be information overload, and
Yes.
I think being able to navigate and sort of pick out what is most important comes with experience and comes
Mhm.
with maturity
Like,
in some ways.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely, and I think there's also a time and place to really dive into all of the nitty gritty, and sometimes like leading into races, you want to not focus as much on it because you can overthink everything. And
Yes,
so you want to be able
exactly.
to feel it more. And so
Yeah.
like deep in a training block, yes, like do all the nitpicking, assess all the data, but then when you come to race day, at the end of the day, like you need to just ride your bike. And so
Right.
use it as a tool, but it doesn't need to drive every decision.
Oh, geez, thanks. Thanks for saying that, because I'm just like, well, I know when you're at your level, you've got to expect a certain amount of that and be able to, like you said, navigate it with maturity, because you can't be like, oh my God, you're looking at, like feeling like those eyeballs on you all the time.
Yeah.
When you just basically doing your job,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Annie, do you have anything that you would love to share with all those little girls who would aspire to be you and make it to the Olympics on the track or even on the road?
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them?
That's a hard question.
Oh, come on. Think of all the little girls that look up to you. Like, oh my gosh, she's so awesome. And they're going to be watching you.
Yeah, I think
Olympics.
not being afraid to really own your journey. As I talked about earlier, like taking a bit of control over my training plan and being an active participant in like creating that path. There's a quote that I really like that I can't remember who said it, but it's there is no path, you make the path by walking. And and I think that's really important, especially for young athletes, to not to think about what you're doing, to not be afraid of forging your own way through sport. Not everyone's journey is going to look the same. Mine certainly doesn't look the same as some of my teammates, and you have to figure out what works for you, what motivates you. So I'd say that take ownership of your process and your journey.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, this has been great. I feel so blessed that I've been able to chat with you and get to know you better. Just being a racer myself way back in the day. Sometimes I'm like, oh, if I hadn't had kids, what would have happened? But don't worry, you got lots of time to think about that.
Yes, yes.
But it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I know that everybody here is going to be cheering for you guys, you ladies, when you in August, when everybody starts heading to Tokyo, and just wishing you guys luck. And so everybody, thank you to our listeners. And we just want to make sure that all of you put your notifications on so that you make sure you don't miss another episode from the Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast. And Annie and I have a special request, and we always request, if you have a takeaway, we'd love to hear it. And we love 5 stars in a review, wouldn't we?
Of course.
Yeah. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Annie. It's been a pleasure. We wish you luck in Tokyo, and maybe we can have you back afterwards. Like
Amazing.
When you cleared the head, you're like,
yes,
okay,
yes.
now I know.
Yeah. Give me a month or two to reset.
We'll get you right in the mid when you get back and just like, okay, this is what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat. That was great.
Oh, thank you so much. And you've been excellent guest. So thank you, everybody. Have an amazing day.